researching a novel called People of the Flow about the Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, who were the sort of legendary people, semi-legendary Celtic tribe that brought music and poetry to Ireland. And I went to Bruna Boigné. I took the tour of this incredible megalith. It's 5,200 years old. And I had done a lot of reading before I got there about Irish myth and finding that swans were at the center of so many of their stories. And they played a really powerful role in these myths. They seemingly swans symbolize the soul and certainly music and singing and love and all this stuff. And I was on the tour, and the tour guide said, "Oh yeah, there's these whooper swans here are still coming here from Iceland every year." And I kind of went, "Oh, so they were really here then. It wasn't just they were making up these stories about swans and myths and stuff. No, this whole valley was covered with swans every winter. I mean, the huge whooper swans, they're enormous." And I thought, well, that's interesting. Here we have a megalithic site that's aligned to the winter solstice, still today. And you've got birds flying in for the winter, and they're at the middle of the mythology. I thought maybe I should look around at some other cultures and see if I find the same thing. And that's what happened. I mean, I found the same thing, in India, in South Africa, in China, in the United States, for Native Americans, and South America as well. And I was just sort of blown away by how consistent it was, how these structures aligned to the winter solstice were all built on the winter grounds of migratory birds, and some huge winter grounds, including in India. These aren't just like a few birds gather in the winter. These are some of the biggest winter grounds in the world, and they always coincided with these megaliths that were aligned to the winter solstice. But well, that's got to be something, that beyond, coincidence. Something's going on here. So, the next 3 years was spent digging and research and coming up with, what's in the book, which is, I think, fairly powerful evidence that birds played an enormous role in this, in the mythology and the cosmology of ancient cultures around the world. I think an appreciation of our ancestors. I feel like we tend to look back in condescension to some degree to our ancestors as if they were somehow less than we are, which is really not the case at all. It's fascinating to find out what people did with the resources they had thousands of years ago and how they organized themselves. Today we have funerals, for people, that pass away. And back then, death was very, was pretty common. It looks like they had an annual celebration of releasing of the souls of everyone who had died that year, instead of having one funeral after another all through the year. They organized this in late October to sort of have it all be a community experience of processing the trauma of death of people who have passed in that year. Everyone at once, everyone goes together, everyone gets the singing and the drumming and the dancing and lifting their souls up to the heavens. I mean, this is extraordinary, stuff. I mean, for people, I've been very, I think, ingenious in terms of managing this incredible trauma and sort of understanding what death is about. And I think in many cases, really, in most cases, emphasizing that life is a cycle and a continuum, and there's no period at the end of the sentence for people. And that was celebrated, by the entire community at once, I think is just extraordinarily healthy way to approach death. And in contrast, I think, to the Western culture today, who I think do a pretty horrible job at processing death and having people, get through the grieving period. So I think there's a lot to learn from. Well, I was lucky writing the book because I didn't have to have a full-time job. I'm sure a lot of people do. So I don't have any great advice about how to write a book while you're working constantly. I was fortunate enough to have a couple of years to work on it. It was, really a compulsion for me. So it wasn't difficult to just throw myself at it, and it would involve a mixture of research, taking notes on the research, which usually would involve books and some online as well. I mean, there's just all these different phases that I kind of would jump back and forth between. My own style is that I like to jump from one task to another. So if I'll do notes for a whole day, the next day would be, writing up a sort of a categorization or an analysis of the notes. I've found that to be really helpful in terms of just gathering a lot of information and then trying to create categories and trying to make sense of all that information. And then, the writing would at first be really, I wasn't trying to write a final product where I sit down and try to write. I was just trying to write a scaffold, like a skeleton of what the book would be. And that it was really at the very end that I added as much sort of conversational, one-on-one feeling of the writing as I could, to try to, certainly don't want to sound academic, and hopefully I didn't, and hopefully it's very conversational. But that was the very end, and I think almost the you have to give yourself treats, along the way. You have to go, okay, this is the fun part now. You did all the work building the scaffolding, building the skeleton, building the plot. Now you get to do the fun part. So, I mean, I think there's a certain negotiation with yourself about the fun stuff and the dreary stuff, but at the end of the day, you've just got to have the compulsion. You've got to have the drive, the passion to take all the time to do it. I certainly had a compulsion to share the product too early, to reach out to agents or publishers with what I thought was sort of a complete enough story, because writing on your own can be difficult. I mean, it's like you want other people to sort of see what you're doing, to kind of give you feedback and so forth. I went out too early with with a couple of versions of this. Every time I did it, I would come across something astounding like a week later that made the whole project more interesting. And I think even as submitting when I submitted to you, since then I've discovered stuff that's really more interesting. At some point you have to go out there and do it. But I would say, it would have been good to sort of go, look, really wait until this thing is completely cooked, until you really think it's exceptional. Battle that instinct to just go running with it out to someone and to show it to someone. Just give it a little more time when you think you're ready. Just give it a little more time. That's what I should have done. I really hope that people will understand the value of migratory birds. We as a species are wiping them out. I mean, it's bad news out there, and nobody likes to hear that, but it really is pretty bad in terms of the studies. The last chapter of the book is devoted to the latest information on the status of migratory bird populations. And their role in human history is enormous and way more significant than anyone has realized up to this point. I think the evidence is really strong that people have been following bird migration routes in the most busy bird migration corridors around the world since, Homo erectus and Neanderthals. I mean, the thing about bird migration routes is they never change because they're defined by topography and large bodies of water and volcanism. And none of those things change. So it's like a window into history. And if you look at those migration routes and you compare them to the fossil record, there's really no question that every genus Homo has been following the most busy migratory bird corridors in the world, for a long time. And it was smart to do because that's where all the best ecosystems are located. I think understanding that how important birds were to our past, to our evolution, will hopefully help people care about them more and sort of expand awareness about not wiping them out. What I hope the takeaway is ultimately is that the understanding comes, and then oh goodness, what are we doing? That comes with it, I hope.